Hello and welcome. Elena Rahrig here from ElenaRahrig.com. Today I'm here interviewing Teresa Zumwald. How are you today, Teresa?
Awesome. It's been a great day.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started. I'm going to start off by reading your introduction. All right. So tonight I want to introduce you again to Teresa Zumwald, a speechwriter, speech coach, communications consultant, and author in Dayton, Ohio. She's also the president of Zumwald & Company, which she established in 1989. Teresa has written keynote addresses, special occasion speeches, MC remarks, employee presentations, and speaker introductions for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and subject matter experts in the United States. She is also the speechwriter for the chairman of the board of a global manufacturing company based in Europe. Very impressive. Teresa tells me she spent a lot of time this year listening to presentations and speeches at special events and conferences across the country where speakers have blown their chances to captivate their audiences. I've been to a few of those myself this year. As a speechwriter and speech coach, Teresa writes speeches on some challenging and often controversial topics for her clients and must ensure her speakers captivate their audiences every time. Since 2013, her speeches have won 8 international, national, and regional awards, including 3. You're going to have to help me out with this one. Is it Cicero? Cicero speech writing awards from Vital Speeches of the Day. All of you know that speakers who don't have content that captivates and a delivery style that captivates are wasting their time and their audience's time. Speakers like these fail to change how an audience thinks or behaves. Tonight, we'll talk about what makes speeches captivating and what does not, and how speakers can develop material that intrigues instead of bores their audience. Teresa is an active member of the Professional Speechwriters Association, Toastmasters International, and the International Association of Business Communicators, among others, and holds a BA in journalism from the Ohio State University. I absolutely love everything you have going on. So tell me a little bit about this award. Say it again.
Sure. It's the Cicero Speechwriting Awards, and it's given by an organization called Vital Speeches of the Day. And it's actually an international competition. So you're competing with folks that are doing all different kinds of speeches from literally across the world. And I have been fortunate enough to win 3 of those. And they were just for really fun speeches that we did. And it really kind of elevates your credibility in the industry. So that was really a fun thing. And it's a great organization.
Very awesome. I'm going to have to look into that myself. That sounds amazing. I have not done it. All right. Well, tonight we are talking about captivating our audience. So exactly what do you mean by captivating the audience?
When you are captivating someone with the way you speak, they are on the edge of their seat. They're not doing their grocery list. They're not thinking about what they're doing tomorrow. You are literally hanging on their every word. And there are so many different techniques that allow you to do that. It requires a lot of charisma, for example. It also requires you to fascinate your audiences in some way. You must attract them. You almost have to transport them to kind of another place. And if you can accomplish all these things, you are captivating them. You are actually giving a performance. It's all that's very much elevated. And a lot of speakers don't get there because they don't work hard enough at it. They don't practice enough. And if you really want to be captivating, you have to do all those things. You have to envision yourself transforming and transporting your audience somewhere else so that they're not distracted. And I always say doing things like their grocery list. So that's our goal, is to captivate our audience. We want to transport them somewhere else.
Absolutely. And how many times have I been in a room where there's a speaker, and as a speaker, we look around and we pay attention to these details, and I'll look around and people are on their phone or they're doodling, and I don't blame them. I would not do that because I know better, but I want to sometimes, so I get it. But listening to you explain captivating, it reminds me of watching a really good movie to where my husband can say, Elena, do you want anything? I'm going to the kitchen. Elena. And I'm like so into the movie.
Exactly.
That's what you're talking about when you're talking about captivating your audience.
That's exactly right. And how many speakers do we know of that do that? I mean, a lot of the TEDx speakers or the TED speakers do it. And sometimes you get really lucky and you go to a local speaker and they are captivating. One in particular that I saw in Dayton that I will literally never forget was Scott McGowan. And you can actually look up his talk. He did a presentation for the Chamber of Commerce, and he also did one for TEDx Dayton. And it was a very captivating talk about how we can affect our health and healthcare. I would encourage you to look it up, but it was definitely a really cool local example here in Dayton about some guy that took a topic that may not be considered captivating, you know, healthcare issues. Sometimes people tune out. He made it captivating. So check that out on TEDx Dayton. I believe it was 2014.
That was my first thought when you said healthcare. I was thinking, how can somebody make healthcare captivating? Would you by chance know how to spell his last name?
Yes, it's McGohan. Scott McGohan.
Okay, I had a W in there.
Yep, 2014. So.
All right, awesome. And then going back to what you said about speakers have to practice. You know, in today's world, it seems like everybody wants everything for nothing and they want it quick and easy. And that's the one thing I teach my clients is quick and easy is the quickest way to failure. You have to look at this as you're going to school, getting a college degree. You have to take time and effort and really put into it. So I like that you brought that up. So is it really, in your opinion and your expertise, is it really a huge deal if they're not captivating? Like, how big of a problem is this?
Well, let me give you an example, Elena. I went to a conference this summer with colleagues. Now, this was an international conference. I'm going to not say what it is to protect the guilty. It was an international conference. So right there, the bar is really high. The speaker had it wasn't a keynote, it was a breakout session, but it was an entire hour. She was a peer at an international conference, and she delivered material that would have been relevant 10 years ago. And I was absolutely appalled. First of all, people pay literally thousands of dollars to go to an international conference. They expect to hear the top level speakers, and this particular speaker gave us content that, like I say, would have been relevant 10 years ago. You could watch the people in the audience just about want to pull their hair out. Most of them left. Some of them didn't out of respect because she was so painfully bad. She just was not in touch with what was going on. She was not captivating with either her content or her delivery. How she failed so miserably, I have no idea. But it was just horrible. And literally, I will never forget it. And the problem with that is it puts her into this hole professionally that she cannot get out of. When I think about her and when I think about her organization, I think about that failed speech. And that's the problem with not working really, really hard to be captivating. People remember when you're so bad. And I will never forget this person. I mean, I don't even trust her as a colleague. But it really, really puts you in a bad, bad place and in a corner. And it could take her a long time to get out of that. She will never get asked to speak at this organization again. So it really ruins your reputational capital. That is the danger of not being captivated.
I 100% agree, and that is the importance. I listen for everything you say when you say something, so it kind of goes to another topic, but it really expresses the importance of being up to date on material. And I cannot stress enough is you have to be a lifetime learner. You have to be up in the news of what's going on and just everything around you, the newest teachings, and you just got to stay on top of it. It doesn't sound like she really did that.
Which was surprising based on her level in the organization. And, you know, part of it is you have to be willing to invest in that. I mean, you know, I try to set aside money to go to conferences, to, you know, invest in that learning because things are changing so fast. Some people aren't willing to make that investment, but you have to sacrifice. If it's that important to your career, you've got to make some sacrifices to do that lifelong learning, as you said.
Do you feel that maybe there was a little ego in play, or that ego does get in play? If somebody has a high title, they think that everybody's just going to love them, so it doesn't matter, and they don't have to spend as much time on their speech? Do you think that happens sometimes?
I think you have hit the nail on the head, because she was with a very respected organization, a very respected brand. So some people went to that session, I am sure, because of that brand and that organization. And it was a letdown. I mean, I can't even imagine she had colleagues there. People were whispering about this long after she spoke. And so, yes, it can ruin your brand. It definitely can ruin your brand.
And that's one reason I teach my clients. I don't know if you've ever done this or if you teach people this, but I always teach them, if you have a new speech, hit up your local social clubs, like your Sortoma, your Optimist, Toastmasters. Practice first before you charge anybody for it. Because if you charge somebody for your speech, or you're in front of a huge audience to where it matters more, then it's going to ruin that reputation to where you can go, like I just wrote a new speech. Gosh, I haven't spoken at a free social club in a couple of years, but I wrote a new speech, wanted to practice it a little bit, went out there, went great, but I recognize there's some things that I need to tweak a little bit. It wasn't as long as I wanted. So perhaps maybe if she would have done that, might have saved her a little bit.
Either that, or you just made me think maybe it was a recycled speech from 10 years ago, and that's the other thing. People get in a hurry and they do that kind of thing. But going back to the one thing you said about practicing, Toastmasters, excellent opportunity. I'm writing a speech for somebody right now that's going to be delivered at a Rotary Club. And we are treating this just as serious as if he were getting paid $10,000 to speak at a conference. Because, in the future, this material will be other places for sure. But we are practicing hard on this speech. Yes, it's at a Rotary. It's still important because his reputation is at stake.
Right.
So, yes, take advantage of those opportunities and take them seriously. Don't treat it as, oh, it's just a local event. Treat it very seriously. I can't tell you literally how many hours we've been working together so that his delivery is just right. I mean, in fact, we're getting together tomorrow again because he said, this is really helpful. Let's do it again. And I said something to him. He said, well, how long should I practice every day? I said, this is for your own benefit. You should be running through this several times every day until our next coaching session. So he was trying to get from me, like, what's the minimal amount? An hour, one time a day. He wanted me to give him a benchmark. And I said, the more you can practice, the better. It is for your own good. It's not for my good. My heavy lifting's over. I've written the speech for you. So I cannot emphasize that enough. Take every opportunity seriously because your reputation is at stake.
Absolutely. And in my office, on that side of my office over there, is the whole filming studio over there. And so I set my camera up and I even record myself while I'm practicing, because I may find that, oh, it felt good, but then I watched the video and was like, no, not as good as I wanted. So definitely do that. So what is the number one key concept that you would teach for people to help them to become captivating?
I think where people go wrong is that they spend little to no time thinking about, analyzing, dissecting the people who are going to be in that audience. So go back to what I said earlier about what makes you captivating. You want to get the audience on the edge of their seat. You want to transport the audience somewhere else, of where you're going to take them on some kind of a journey. If you spend no time thinking about the actual people who are going to be in those seats, are they male? Are they female? How old are they? What do they believe in politically? What's their socioeconomic status? Where do they work? Where are they from? I mean, getting it down to the details of the exact people who are going to be there. And you can do that if you work with the event folks. It can give you a ton of information about who is going to be in that audience. If you treat every audience like a big blob of people, I can guarantee you will not be captivating and you will not connect with them. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. I encourage people to write it down. Do the audience analysis such that you really know this in your head. You have written it down. You know exactly who they are. And, for a speech coming up, we actually have a registrant list. So we know what companies they're from. We know how long they've worked at certain companies. And it allows you to make connections in the speech with exact people in the audience. There's a lot of techniques you can do once you really know which butts are in the seats. And that is the first thing you must do if you want to make a speech captivating. You need to slice and dice and know every single thing you possibly can about your audience. And that requires asking a lot of questions.
100% agree. Again, of course. So you just brought a whole new meaning to the word target audience, because I don't know if traveling is the right word, but it's the first word that came to my mind listening to this. It's like you have a traveling target audience. It's always changing. It can be different every time. And a lot of people aren't used to that because they're selling a product or a program and this is their target audience. But as a speaker, it can change.
Absolutely. And this is another danger about people that have, I'm just going to call it a canned presentation. You can have a signature presentation, but if you don't figure out a way to adapt that for every single audience you're delivering it to, you're not going to connect with them. You are not going to captivate them. You will not do as well as you could do, and sometimes you could even fail. So that's something you have to pay attention to, and you've got to spend time on up front, especially if you have a signature presentation. Every audience is different. Every audience is different. And there can also be things happening in the news when you deliver that signature speech that you're going to want to tweak it. I mean, you should never just do a copycat presentation, if you will.
So how would you recommend somebody learning about the audience they're about to go to? Because, you know, I have my pre-program questionnaire that asks about the audience. Is that enough, or do they need more detail? How do you find out?
I ask a lot of questions. If, for example, I'll give you an example of a speech that I'm working on right now. The gentleman that's with this group knows the members of this group. And this is an example I wanted to bring up later, but it's about a controversial topic. And it was a little scary to write this speech because it was so controversial. So I said, who's going to be in the audience? You know, and we're coming off this very tough political season. And this topic could be misconstrued as a political issue. And so when you talk politics, especially right now in this country, we know we've got two camps. So how do you talk about an issue that's controversial that could immediately divide your audience? I mean, that is a super big challenge. But I went through, and with the speaker, I talked to him about who's going to be in the room, what are their political beliefs, where do they work. Like I say, we've got a membership list, so we know the balance of profits, for-profit companies, non-for-profit companies. Event planners should be your friends. They love to be asked questions about the audience. There's a lot you can get from like a program questionnaire, but since, again, my background's journalism, I like to get on the phone and talk to people, because you're going to get a lot more when you can ask those questions one-on-one with somebody. But don't give up. There's definitely somebody out there that knows the answers. I've got, like I say, I've got another event planner I'm working with, the president of the organization. These people will be happy to spend 10 or 15 minutes talking to you because they want you to be successful in front of their group. They don't want you to fail. They want you to deliver stuff that's valuable to their members. So take the time and talk to people. Do little interviews with people. But the presidents of the organization, sometimes the membership directors are awesome. But you have to put in that time so that you know what you're up against. You don't want to be surprised about an audience. That's for sure.
Amen. Well, I love everything you're teaching us. So let's talk about the content of the speech. Where do most speakers blow it? Meaning, where do most speakers not captivate their audience? What are they doing wrong?
Well, as they used to say, do you want the whole list or just the top 10? And I think the best way to do this is to give you a couple of examples. I had mentioned I've been to about 4 conferences this year. And in terms of content that was not captivating, I went to a conference where a professor was the keynote speaker. Now, see, I'm kind of like going like this because just bringing back the memory makes me want to sweat. But he was billed as the keynote speaker for this very important conference. Again, it was expensive. People were paying for this. The professor came in late. So then, of course, he got all the jokes about being the absent-minded professor. This was kicking off the conference, so it started things off poorly. When he finally arrived, they had to flip the schedule because he was so late. And when he started talking, he went off on all of these tangents. Wherever his mind took him is where he went. Now, he had a prepared presentation with slides. We got through 3 slides in 1 hour. And the tangents, I could draw a picture of where the tangents went. And it was so horrible. People were looking at each other like, get me out of this room. I mean, literally, I think it was the worst content in terms of not captivating content I've ever seen in my entire life. And the fact that he was the keynote speaker I just blew my mind. So that was one example. There was another presentation I heard again this year, a major company in this town, major. I wanted to hear this guy. He was the new leader of this organization. My expectations were up here. No, well-known brand, brand new leader. He had a lot at stake. He came into this presentation and basically delivered, barfed out a bunch of facts. Now, we all know that a presentation that is only based on logic is not going to win an audience's hearts and minds. Whether he relied too much on his brand or his name, I don't know. But when he got finished, this was the telltale story. When he got finished, nobody asked any questions. And I thought that was very telling. The man spent 25 minutes spewing facts and only facts, no connection to the audience. It was all about me, 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 and what I want to tell you. And the fact that he said, does anybody have any questions? Everybody was so shell-shocked, they didn't know what to ask because there was no connection to them. And this was a room full of business people. So again, he blew it from a content standpoint. He could have spent some time figuring out how to connect that information about his organization, which is relevant to business owners in that group, but he didn't. He spewed out facts. It was a complete failure. Not one person asked a question. Very telling to me.
Anything else? These
Well,
are good.
You get me on a pedestal. There's so much potential. There's so much potential, and it just blows my mind when people blow it.
Yeah. So I hear the rambling is not good to do, and emotion sells. That's what we have to remember, right?
Absolutely.
You have to bring emotion into it, the whole facts. And do you feel like the facts, the people that are all about the facts, they just have less personality and they're more book smart? Do you think? Because like my husband's an engineer. He
Right.
can never get up and speak from the heart, but he could give you some facts. He is like the encyclopedia of the house.
Oh my gosh, I am so glad you brought that up because I'm going to blow this myth away about poor engineers, okay?
Oh, okay.
My husband, or not my husband, my father is an engineer and my brother's an engineer. So we have this mental picture of engineers are boring. Oh my gosh, I'm going to show you this book right here. Okay, so here's this book. It is called 7 Secrets to Superior Presentations, and Elena, it was written by an engineer. I am not kidding you. Now, let me tell you about this, why this is so cool. I'm really excited about this, if you can't tell. This guy is an engineer. He developed a 7-step formula, and being true to his engineering side, that helps technical folks as well as plain old communicators like us deliver outstanding presentations. He does so well with this 7-step formula that when he teaches his method to engineers who, as you know, have to make presentations to win jobs, right? Especially if you're in a consulting engineering firm. You're up against all your engineering competitor friends that also have to make a presentation in a professional manner that sells, all right? This guy's 7-step method is so successful that he has data, because engineers like data. The engineering companies that use his method win jobs at a substantially higher rate than engineering companies that give regular old presentations that we've seen engineers give. So I was really impressed with this guy. He spoke at one of the conferences that I went to this year, and I was just blown away, like, this is great. I mean, there is hope for engineers, right? And in fact, he's so good, we're actually bringing him to Cincinnati to do an encore presentation for another group, because I really believe his message needs to be shared. So bottom line is, even if you're book smart, you're technical, you're an engineer, there's hope for you to deliver outstanding presentations with emotion as well as the facts, because that's what is helping the folks that he trains win these jobs. It's absolutely incredible. I was so pleased.
Well, I wrote it down. I'm going to buy it. And I will say engineers are not boring. My husband is a comedian. Like, we are always laughing in this house. He always has these one-liners, and sometimes they're dry, but that's what makes them so funny. I don't know if you saw the one I posted on Facebook recently, that it was a little one-liner joke. He just makes us shake our head and laugh, but he's always clowning around, so he really is fun. For sure. So I'm glad you said that too.
Yeah, and I don't want to pick on engineers, but the author of this book is Chuck Roberts. And like I said, 7 Secrets to Superior Presentations. It's worth reading, and it's definitely worth hearing him speak because he walks the talk.
Awesome. I'm gonna look him up. Do you know if he has anything on YouTube?
I believe he does. Like I said, I had the benefit of seeing him live, and it was absolutely wonderful.
I will definitely check him out. So talking about content, what makes the actual content captivating? What are some examples?
Well, can I give you an example by reading an excerpt from a speech?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's how we learn, by hearing versus, showing versus telling. So let me give you the opening for a speech that is going to be coming up soon. And this is actually for that controversial topic that I mentioned. I'm not going to reveal the speaker's name or the organization, but you'll get an idea of how you can captivate somebody right out of the chute. And the challenge here is, this is a controversial topic. So if you know anything about Robert Cialdini's principles of persuasion and how do you get people on your side, one of the first things you want to do is make yourself likable to them. And one way to do that is by finding things you have in common with them. That was the challenge for this speech, because we knew it was a controversial topic and we wanted to win them right out of the chute. So this is how we are winning them right out of the chute, with something common and familiar. Each year, our National Park Service issues a top 10 list of the most visited national parks. Now you can probably guess which ones are the most popular. Great Smoky Mountains and Grand Canyon, Rocky Mountain and Yosemite, Yellowstone and Zion, Olympic and Grand Teton, Acadia in Maine, and my all-time favorite, Glacier in Montana, because it is so remote and so untouched. For as long as I can remember, our family has spent many vacations visiting all the parks and the monuments and the historical sites that make up America's national park system. Last year, an amazing amount of people visited the parks, 307 million people. And I am betting we are going to break another record this year on the 100th anniversary of our National Park Service. All year long, America has been celebrating our national park system. And that includes paying tribute to all the people that made it possible. People like John D. Rockefeller Jr. Now, most of us know the Rockefellers as free enterprise capitalists who earned billions in the oil industry. But John Jr. was famous for something else. Now, you may not know it, but he actually bought and donated land for some of today's most popular national parks: Great Smoky Mountains, Yosemite, Grand Teton, Acadia. He even helped fund Yellowstone and many others. If it weren't for a free enterprise capitalist like Rockefeller, cities might have sprung up in place of our national park system. And our treasured national spaces may have become hidden private places. But instead, our national parks were preserved for all of us to enjoy. One writer put it this way: the national park system is a great example of philanthropy. Without a rich industrial titan, the expansion and preservation of our national parks may not even have occurred. Perhaps we should not only celebrate the national park system, but we should also celebrate capitalism. So that is how we introduced what some might say is a controversial and somewhat of a political topic in 2016. The idea is to come up with something we all can agree we like: the national parks. You want to get people thinking about, oh, I went on a vacation to the Great Smoky Mountains. I agree with you that these are great things. I'm so glad they were preserved by a free enterprise capitalist. So that is a technique to start winning your audience, to find something that you all have in common, that you share. And so we landed on the national parks because who can argue with the national parks? This is something that all Americans enjoy. So we immediately get points in the speaker's column that this is something we can all agree on. And then we slowly introduce something that we're trying to get them to think a little bit differently about this. And that gets you started in the right direction as a speaker. To be captivating with something, again, that we can all agree on.
Absolutely love it, and definitely captivated me. And it did bring up a question, again, kind of off topic. Do you ever have to write a speech for somebody that you absolutely have the opposite opinion of?
Well, what was funny is when we started this particular speech, I wasn't sure where we were going with this, because the challenge was, let's write a speech on free enterprise capitalism. Well, that's like saying I want to write a story about the United States of America. I mean, what is the narrow topic that we're really going to talk about? Because that's another danger where speakers go. They start out like that. Let's write about free enterprise capitalism. You can't just write a speech about free enterprise capitalism. It's too much. It's everything plus the kitchen sink. So the first challenge with that is to figure out one through line of what we're going to say about this topic and focus on that. And I think once we did that, we figured out a way that we could win an entire audience to see his point of view. So it requires a lot of coaching when you have a speaker who feels really passionate about a topic that maybe not the whole audience is going to feel that passionate about, but you want them to. You want to change their hearts and minds. But you've got to figure out what is the narrow view that we can take to get people on our side. And it's not everything but the kitchen sink. It is one aspect of that you have to choose and stick to and be ruthless about throwing everything else out that does not stick with that through line.
I love that you brought that up, because one of the things my dad taught me at a young age, I was a very fast talker and I wanted to tell you everything. And it was, oh my gosh, this happened, blah, blah, blah. But then, so when I came into business, my dad started me at 12 years old and going to his work and helping as secretary and learning business. So he had taught me, you have to feed him with a spoon, not a shovel.
I love it.
And I think that is pretty much what you just described. Is a lot of times we're so passionate and we want to tell you everything and get our snow shovel out and shove all this down your throat, when we need to get the spoon out and start there. So
that reminds me of a quote from an old journalism professor. He was not mine, but I heard him speak, and he said something to the fact that the chips that you throw away are what define the statues. So think about that. We want to put everything in our speeches and our talks. We have so much to share, but when you think about a statue, when you're chiseling a statue, the chips that fall to the ground, that's what defines the statue. And I really try to think about that. And I, because we don't want to cut anything from our speeches. We love everything we write, but we have to kill our darlings, right? We have to kill our darlings, and that's a hard process. But at the end of the day, if you have the bravery and the courage to do that, you will have a better speech. You will definitely have a better speech.
That's a great analogy. And when we paint pictures like that for people, it helps us to remember the lesson. So great analogy. All right, I could just keep talking to you off script forever. So to rein both of us back in.
Sure, sorry.
It's probably me, actually. I keep leading you astray. But let's go back. So let's move to delivery. That's what the next part of this is. So where do speakers blow it during the delivery of their speech?
Well, I will go ahead and give another example, because like I said, this has been a rich year for me for hearing a lot of talks. We had, at one of the conferences I was at, a wonderful speaker from the UK. I mean, she was fabulous, especially because of what she's done in this life, okay? She had this is an example of great content. She's done some wonderful things. We could all learn from what she's done. Everybody, again, was ready to hear her. But when she spoke, she nearly whispered when she began. So that's a terrible way to begin, to nearly whisper. And I was just puzzled. I thought, am I just not catching this? I know you have great stuff that you've done from a profession standpoint, but she was whispering. She was not enthusiastic. She was not captivating from a delivery standpoint. At one point, she was talking in a monotone, and it's almost like she was thinking that her content was going to carry her delivery. But as we all know, we have to have both. And she was also disconnected. So as she was delivering things, she was not connecting the dots for the people in the audience. When you don't do that, and when you're not enthusiastic about a topic that literally had international appeal, she blew it. And it was such a shame, because she had a great message to share. Toward the end, she got a little bit better. And I don't know if it was nerves, but I mean, she has spoken on, an international stage before, but I was really disappointed. At first I was surprised, and second, I was disappointed because I thought, wow, you've got all these folks in the room ready to hear this, and you are literally whispering. You are talking in a monotone. You are not engaging us. You are not getting us with some kind of a big opening. That was the other thing. She had no great opening to draw us in. And this is where people make a lot of mistakes. So if people are starting a poor delivery, as you said, people are looking at their phones, they're doing whatever. Thankfully, I think her presentation had a lot of video. I think that saved her. But as a speaker, you can't rely on that 100% because what do I remember? I remember her poor delivery. And you don't want that to be the lasting memory of yourself as a speaker.
Very, very true. One of the things I learned, and I have to work a little bit harder on, is the 3 tonalities that you can utilize in your speech: the warrior, sage, and lover, and knowing when to use them, when not to use that one. The very first speech I ever gave as a motivational speaker, because I've been speaking for companies selling their product since my early 20s, but it was at one of those that the meeting planner came up to me and said, or it was the owner of the company, came up to me and said, the motivational speaker, his flight, something messed up, can you help us out? And I said, sure, give me 10 minutes. Wrote down some stuff and went up there, and then I said, I quit. I walked off stage and said, I quit. I'm going to go start my own thing. And that's when I became a motivational speaker.
Wow.
People mad. But I tried to say it gracefully, but it still made me mad. But the very first time I went out and spoke on my topic, I videotaped it so I could watch. I looked like I was scolding my audience like they were my children because I didn't understand the facial expression, the tonalities. My passion can come across almost angry, but I was just passionate, And I watched that video and was like, oh, that's why I've struggled with relationships my whole life. Like, that's why. I was like, people feel like I'm always yelling at them.
Oh.
Yeah. So I love that you brought up the tonality aspect of that. I definitely took it another course again, but it's very true.
That's really funny. And, your analogy reminded me about the facial expression thing. I mean, the guy I'm working with right now on this upcoming speech, he is passionate about this topic, but he's a little nervous. And when he talks about his organization, he was stone-faced, just like what you said. And I said to him, oh my gosh, you love this organization. Let us see that you love it. Smile when you talk about, what this is about. But you had to tell him to smile. And which is surprising. You would think that would come naturally. But again, this is self-awareness, of yourself as a speaker. He didn't realize he wasn't, exuding the passion with his smile. And we said, when you say that line, smile like you just love it. So, yeah, it's interesting. Self-awareness is a big thing. Sometimes you need somebody else to say, hey, or like you said, you taped yours and you were able to pick up on that, which is super smart.
Yep. And then I always tell people too, God put my nose on my face funny because if I'm not careful, it'll crinkle up and it looks like I smelled something nasty. And so that is the hardest one for me to control. But even doing these interviews, I notice if I'm really intent on what you're saying, I'll start to do that. And you're probably like, oh my gosh, she hates me. I've tried really hard. Not real. But it is something we just really have to pay attention to because those things, you can have a great message, but nobody's hearing you because of body language, tonality, and all that. So great points. So what are some examples of let's do the opposite. What creates captivating deliveries?
Well, again, the best thing I can do is give you an example, and I would encourage everybody to look this up because I was so fortunate to hear this guy in person. It's wonderful to hear TEDx people because we've got this awesome capability now to hear great speakers anytime we want. But if you get the chance to hear people live, it is so, so cool. And of course, I eat this stuff up. But the one thing I would encourage you to look up is Seth Madison. Have you ever seen anything that he's done, Elena?
No. Is that a double D in his name?
So let me spell it for you. It's S-E-T-H. And last name, Madison, M-A-T-T-I-S-O-N.
Okay, no, I haven't heard of him.
Okay, so you got to look this guy up. And again, if you ever get a chance to see him in real living color, I would go see him. He was probably the most captivating speaker I have ever seen live in my entire life. First of all, his content was great. His content was great. From his image standpoint, his presentation, pretty much only images. He might have had 2 or 3 words, and this was projection. This was big time. This was awesome. But he was extremely captivating because his entire storyline wove seamlessly from one point to the next. I mean, it was magic to hear this guy talk. And I went back, because I remembered this presentation from earlier this year, and I thought, oh, I wonder if he's got some stuff where people could look at this. And I found some, so you can definitely see at least, videos of him. First of all, he has a great message because he's talking about, the old world of work and the new world of work. He had excellent images, but the most captivating thing about his talk was the beauty with which he wove in his hour keynote, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and everything was seamless. And that takes a real skill to weave things seamlessly, because that will definitely captivate your audience. Because something you said in the beginning comes up in the middle, comes up at the end, and it's almost like a musical performance. So I would encourage you to look him up from a delivery standpoint. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So awesome. You know, I've heard recently, again, I don't know if you can see her online, but people that do improv tend to do a really good job with delivery. And I think you can learn a lot from people that have skills of improv theater. And one I would recommend is Karen Hough. So it's Karen, last name Hough. And she's got a company called Improv Edge, IMPROVEDGE. And I believe she's out of Columbus, Ohio. But she was super captivating. She was somebody who, again, she had a message, but she was also very improvisational with her entire presentation. It's a real skill to be able to do that. But the way that she delivered her message, we all got it. It was very simple, and the improv skills just, to me, put her over the top in terms of somebody with a captivating delivery. So if you get a chance as a speaker to maybe try improv, or maybe you could take a class, I don't think that would hurt. No, wouldn't hurt. So.
Yeah, I'm up for the challenge, actually. I'm just teasing you when I'm saying no, but yeah, it's on my thing down here. It's going to be added to my to-do list, and I'm going to invite you to come along.
I would love to do it. I mean, it takes guts, but what do we have to lose? We'll only get better.
Right. I think it's a great idea. So they must do improv in Columbus, because I'd never heard of it around here.
So they also do it in Dayton. I believe the Black Box Theater does it. When there was TEDx Dayton did it a year or 2 ago. They had an improv presentation at TEDx Dayton. So it's not as crazy an idea as you might think if you want to be a good speaker. And Karen Hough has a lot of books too, a couple of books I know of. So I don't think she's the first person to have used improv to help your skills in terms of delivery. So why not?
So have you ever heard of Andy Harrington?
Andy Harrington. Now let me write that down. Tell me.
Okay, so he's out of London. And back when I quit my old job back in my late 20s and decided I was going to do motivational speaking, I was up late one night, everybody was in bed, and I just did a Google search for how to learn how to public speak. Up pops this video of him, total sales presentation thing, but he was so captivating. And the other thing is, I ended up over time then that year, I found more people from London, and I love following London people because they're so real, but they F-bomb it constantly. Like, I am talking, Andy Harrington, he gets paid over $100 grand an hour for speaking, and he will have an audience of 10,000 people, and he will F-bomb it. And I just am in shock, like, what? But then I saw other people from London, they do the same thing. And I'm like, it must be a culture thing. Like, they're not offended by that word at all over there, But he's so super captivating. And when you talked about weaving the story through the whole presentation, it's exactly what he does. As soon as you said it, I knew what you were talking about, because that's what he does. And I ended up taking his public speaking academy on my to-do list for hopefully by the end of 2018. I actually want to go to London and spend, I think we get 4 weeks with them, but it's like, It's $46,000, but then you have to pay for your travel and everything else on top of it. So that is where I really want to go. I would love to meet him in person because he's that captivating.
Well, that is a great reference. I've got that written down.
Yeah, and even if you sign up on his email list, you'll start getting stuff. And he has great teachings in there. He will take clients that he's working with, and he'll show you, they'll actually do a speech newly coming to him, and then he shows you that finished product. So you get to learn so much and see so much. So he really does have great stuff. Of course, he's always trying to sell you, but he gives good stuff away too. So.
It's somebody else to learn from, and I think that's a great point. We can learn from so many different styles. I mean, we can learn things we don't want to do. We can learn things we do want to do. I mean, you mentioned, the F-bomb thing turns you off. I mean, we have to be able to pick and choose, but I love having, the more resources we can have, the better, right?
Yeah. And, well, in all honesty, the F-bomb thing does not turn me off. I would just think that around here, you couldn't do that on stage because it would turn. That's one reason I love him and some of these speakers from London, because I'm like, they really do what they want. Like, I don't think I would ever get up there and do that. Even I just don't have that desire. But I think it's really cool that they say, hey, this is who I am and here's how I speak, Like, for example, one of the training videos, these are actually in his training videos that I took too. He was teaching the students. So when you take the training videos, you see the class that he's teaching. And he's teaching them to tell their story. And he says, I don't understand why some of you think it's so hard to tell your story. It's your effing story. And that was like the first training video, and I'm like, oh my God, what did this guy just say?
But you remembered it, right?
I never forgot it. I learned how to tell my story before I meet him.
That's great.
So, all right. So we talked about captivating content and captivating delivery. Which is more important in your opinion?
I believe the most important thing is captivating content, and let me tell you why. If you haven't taken the time to figure out what your story is that you are speaking about, and all you worry about is the delivery, people will see through that. I believe you can learn how to deliver captivating content, but it doesn't work in the reverse. I had a colleague tell me this, and it really stuck with me. This organization hired a high-paid speaker to do a captivating presentation. And my colleague sat through this. I did not hear this guy, but he shared this with me because he knew I'm interested in this. This highly paid speaker delivered a captivating speech from a delivery standpoint. My colleague said this. He said, when I sat back and thought about it, he really didn't have anything to say. He said his delivery was great. He was enthusiastic. He was wonderful as far as his, enthusiasm and all the right body language. But he said, when I thought about what he said, he goes, I didn't really have any takeaways. Now, I was like, oh my goodness, to me, that's huge. So somebody can see right through crappy content, which is why that's where you have to start. Once you have great content, you can practice and rehearse and be coached. You can learn how to deliver great content. But it's almost like putting lipstick on a pig if it's the other way around. It really is. So that's why you have to start with the content. Don't worry about the delivery. You can learn that once you've got that great message put together. So you have to start with that. And I am a firm believer in that. And my colleague just confirmed it for me because he saw it the other way around. He wasn't fooled. You can't fool people.
Right. So. Well, and what I hear in all of that is he was more of an entertainer than a speaker. So he entertained people with enthusiasm and made them feel good, but he didn't teach them anything or change anybody's minds.
No, and he's in a profession where they expected to have their minds changed or to change their behavior.
Yeah.
And that's why my colleague was so disappointed. He went there to learn something that he could put into practice tomorrow. It didn't happen. He saw it with smoke and mirrors. He saw right through the veil, if you will.
And I would say also on controversial topics, I think you better have both. Because even if your content's good, if your delivery's terrible, they don't like you, so they're not listening to this opinion. Wouldn't you think so, or am I off? No, absolutely. And to be clear, you definitely need both. Right.
You definitely need both. But so many people try to work on their delivery, or like you say, think they're an entertainer, you have got to start with that content and do that hard work to figure out what that narrow message is going to be, and not do everything with the kitchen sink. I mean, that's where you have to start. And again, with the audience and everything else that we've talked about. So start with the captivating content. Figure out what you're going to do to captivate your audience with something they've never heard before. Get them to think differently in some way. That's where the hard work comes in, from the sweat. And then the fun part starts to be, because then you work on the delivery. That's the fun, the heavy lifting to me is over. I mean, in my opinion. So
off that question, have you ever written a speech for somebody and then found it really hard to hand it over because you wanted to do it yourself?
Yes. Yes. And, it's funny. I went to the professional speechwriting conference this year, and I kind of had the attitude, it's hard to part with that. It's kind of like birthing a baby, right? I mean, you're putting words into somebody's mouth. It's serious business. And why you phrase things a certain way. This connects to this, connects to this. And somebody said at this conference, and I thought, okay, you need to change your thinking. They said, once I turn that final speech over to them, it's theirs. It's no longer mine. It's theirs. They can do with it what they want. It's theirs. It's no longer mine. So I thought that's a really great analogy for me, that once I turn it over, it's no longer mine. It's theirs, because they have to own those words. They're speaking them. People are trusting them. So I've kind of changed my attitude there. I have to let it go, let it go. But sometimes, I would love to deliver. And sometimes I'm in the audience and I can hear the whole thing going through my head as they're speaking it. I know what's coming next. It's kind of weird. It's like the tape is playing in my head. But it's really, there is no bigger thrill than sitting in an audience and listening to the speaker deliver the speech the way it was intended. Because I love making people look good. And there's no greater thrill when somebody gets up there and has a standing ovation. And there was one speech I wrote for somebody that was in charge of an organization here in Dayton. She was a keynote speaker at an event, and she literally got a standing ovation. And there was an analogy we had made in the speech about astronauts. One of the people came up after the presentation and said, "You made me feel like an astronaut." And I heard that, I'm like, she accomplished her goal. I mean, she accomplished her goal. So it was very cool. So that is the cool part. That's the celebration part.
Yeah.
Get that kind of a reaction from a talk.
Yeah. Well, I asked you that because I wrote a speech for somebody one time, and it was such a success. And this was, oh gosh, several years ago. And it was such a success. And I was happy for them, but a part of me was like, well, I wrote it. Like, it was so hard to hand it over. And then he only spoke that one time. I was training him, but he was so scared, but the speech was so good, and he used his nervousness as energy. So he did great, but he never wanted to feel that again. So he never got back up on a stage.
Oh,
even though he killed it, they loved him, but he never wanted to feel nervous like that. He said he couldn't sleep for weeks before the speech, and so I was like, "Can I have my speech back?"
Wow.
Yeah, he's never spoken again. He did that one-hit wonder.
Oh my gosh, that is heartbreaking.
I know, and I have talked to him, like, it was a couple years that randomly I'd call him, "Are you ready yet?" Because he has what it takes, but.
Oh, Elena, you should tell him to go to Toastmasters, because, I mean, seriously, and this is a great topic. I'm really glad you brought this up. The reason why that's beneficial, that nervousness that he's felt for all those weeks, if you can go to a Toastmasters club every week, you are cracking at that problem that you've got from an anxiety every week. Whether you have to get up and do an impromptu thing or give a speech or an invocator, whatever it is, you are hitting that fear that you've got every single week. And if you do it week after week after week after week, the nerves get less and less and less, and you gain more and more and more skills. So if you feel like that guy's got potential, I would try to send him to a weekly Toastmasters. And, that's just a shame to let the talent, fade away if he was that great.
Well, the crazy thing is I now help his wife. Yes.
Oh.
So, I don't know. Maybe someday he'll get back up. I don't know. He just has what it takes. I mean, he has a personality, and really, there were points where you could tell he was nervous, but he calmed down a little bit. But I don't think he ever calmed down. I think he learned to channel it. but they absolutely loved them. And we were both pretty new at the time, but I could write a speech. I said, well, I'll write yours. You know, I got us a speaking engagement at a car dealership I lined up 6 speakers, and we each got a day for a bundle price. And so I wrote his speech for his day because it all fell under my company. And they actually liked him better than me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I was like, you outshined me. I was like, they love you.
Oh.
And I don't know. I can't believe he didn't, but I still have his speech. I've never used it, but I still have it if he decides to come back. If he ends up watching this, he knows I'm talking about him.
Oh.
So
Toastmasters. Go to Toastmasters.
Yes. All right. So back on script. I love getting off script. It's super fun. All right. Speaker who wants to develop Okay. What's your best tip for a speaker who wants to develop a captivating speech right out of the gate?
Here's my answer, Elena, right here. Post-it notes.
Oh.
So I bet that surprises you, right?
Completely, 100%.
Okay, so let me tell you why Post-it notes are important. If you go back to when we talked about what's more important, captivating content or captivating delivery, and I said captivating content. But, you know, how do you get there? How do you start? And it's not with your PowerPoint program, and I got to tell you, it's not even with a Word document. If you start thinking about what you're going to be talking about, and you basically put down ideas on Post-it notes. I mean, literally, I do this, and it's a great, easy, freeing technique. When you're thinking about what are you going to do to weave all those stories, what's your point, how are you going to connect the beginning, the middle, and the end, start by writing your points on Post-it notes, slap them on your desk, write the next one, slap it on your desk, and you'll start to see things start to connect. And you can move your Post-it notes around. This fits better with here, this fits better over there. And I am telling you, within 30 minutes, you can have something that's worth working with that makes sense because you're thinking it out on these Post-it notes that you can move around, you can change your mind, and you can do it very quickly. And it's a way to get, again, you don't want to overload people with a lot of information. This really restricts you. You've only got this much space to write on, right? Whatever your thought is. And you do this, you move it around, and I literally, once I've got it figured out, that's what I use to write my outline and then the speech. You're doing the same thing.
No, I'm not. I never heard this. I absolutely love it. I'm showing you. I'm ready. I have all my notes. Check these ones out. These are those little tiny label ones.
Oh my gosh.
1 point.
Yeah.
One word.
Yeah. I like, this is a good size. This forces you to think simple, very simple. You don't want to give yourself an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper because that's where we get into trouble. Think very simple. What's the point you want to make? How are you going to get from this point to this point? And then I always move them around. And when I get finished, I'm like, that's it. That's going to make sense to bring the reader, bring the listener from the beginning to the middle to the end. And I love this. I mean, I love the Post-it note thing. And I tried this one time when I was struggling with, how am I going to do this? This is a complex subject. I don't know how it's going to go. And I was really struggling with 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I tried the Post-it note thing, and it allowed me to think faster with a pencil. That's the other thing. Use a pencil. I could think faster, and it just made connecting those dots so much easier. And if I changed my mind, I could move them around. And it really made the speech writing process less frightening.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you to try that. If you want something captivating, this will simplify your process.
Absolutely love it. Great tip for everybody. Perfect. Love it. So did you just come up with that, or did you learn it somewhere?
No, I tried it because I was frustrated one day, and I thought, I've got to do something different. And my Post-it notes were sitting there, and I thought, what if I just did a quick thought process? This is kind of the thinking. And that's the other thing, too. The thinking part of putting together a speech is way more important than anything else. You have to think before you start writing. And this forces you to think, to go through the thought process of how you're going to put things together. That's why that's why it works. I would encourage you to try it. We all learn and do things differently, different processes. But, we need to do things simply and quickly. Everybody's super busy. This is a way to get there even faster. So
I think this is a great sales video for you to do. I can write your speech on a Post-it note. Hire me today. I absolutely love it. Okay, I'm gonna write a speech. As soon as I get this other stack of to-do list, I'm gonna write a new speech, and I'm gonna do it on your way on Post-it notes, and I'll send you pictures.
Please do, please do. Like I say, connect the dots. It allows you to connect the dots, which is what you've got to do in a speech. You've got to get from the beginning to the end some way, and the Post-it notes help you connect those dots.
And yes, and then I thought I'm gonna use this with my parenting. When my kids are like, but why? Let's get to the point. Let me write it on a Post-it note.
My kids are grown. I should have come up with that a long time ago. Oh.
Or I thought if I have to tell them no, I'll write O on one and N on the other, and tell my little one, if you can figure out what word that says, there's your answer. You gave me all these ideas. See, one idea, my head is going. I'm going to utilize Post-it notes. All right, so final question. Can you share some of your favorite resources for developing and delivering captivating speeches? And this is what we've all been waiting for.
Yes, and I have lots of resources. Like I say, I'm a big conference goer, reader, all this kind of stuff, and I've taken some marvelous training. Probably my number one resource I would recommend, and it's literally somebody I trained under, is Joan Detz, Joan. Her last name is Detz. She is an international speechwriter and speech coach, and she literally wrote the book on how to do a great speech. Just excellent resources. She's recently updated her very first book. I think she updated it in 2015. It's called How to Write and Give a Speech. If you want one practical guide, and I know there's tons of books out there, but I know Joan personally, and what she says really makes a lot of practical sense, and it's just delightful. So I would recommend her highly. Another book I would recommend, and I don't know if you've seen this. Have you seen this by Nancy Duarte?
No, but it looks interesting. I like the looks of it. Nancy.
Okay, so anybody that is doing a speech that is going to be captivating needs to look at anything written by Nancy Duarte. It's Duarte. She has written some wonderful things. She is well known in the industry. Her first book that I really loved, we keep talking about the storyline and how you weave this through the beginning, the middle, and the end. Her first book on that concept was called Resonate. Just a great read. It reads like a storybook. It is not anything that's laborious. I would encourage you to get it. And she followed it up with this new book called Illuminate, about ceremonies and symbolism, and it's just wonderful if you want to do something captivating. Great ideas in here, excellent examples from speakers across the world who have done captivating speeches. She gives kind of the background of all the stuff they've done. That Illuminate book is wonderful. That's another great resource. I mentioned to you my engineer, who's got, my 7 secrets of public speaking, Roberts. Obviously, I don't know if you subscribe to this blog, Elena. It's called Public Words by Nick Morgan. This guy he must write this blog like in the middle of the night, because he is like constantly churning out great content. But from a speaking standpoint, I think if you're serious about being a speaker or putting together great speeches, you need to subscribe to Public Words, a blog by Nick Morgan. It's excellent. Anything on TED Talks is always good. Anderson just has a relatively new book out called TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking, but that's something that everybody probably knows about.
Real quick, when you look that way at your resource list, your voice is trailing off, so we didn't catch that last name.
Oh, okay, sure. It was Chris Anderson of the TED Talk books. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah. So it's called TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking. If you want to see folks that are winning those Cicero speechwriting awards that I mentioned, now these are the top people across the United States whose speeches are so good that they're, winning awards. Any of the Cicero speechwriting award winners, which you can find on a site called Vital Speeches of the Day, and it's vsotd.com. There's tons of speeches they have on there all the time, but the ones that have won awards are under that Cicero category. And it's really, really cool to see what's going on across the country in terms of people that are giving captivating talks. You can read the manuscript. You won't get the benefit of the delivery, but since we talked about content being so important, read those speeches and see what you get out of them. You get great ideas for openings. how they handled controversial topics, just all across the board. You can learn a lot just by reading speeches that other people have written. It might give you great ideas for your own work. And the other thing I would recommend, finally, I kind of alluded to this before, is Robert Cialdini's book on influence. Every speech we give is really to persuade somebody to think a certain way or to behave in a certain way. And if you don't understand the principles of persuasion, you're not going to be as good at doing that. So I would really recommend Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, just to kind of have in your head, how do you persuade people? It's just an excellent book on those principles. I would definitely recommend that.
Now, I haven't heard of him, but I have read books like that my dad has given me. And I think one was How to Win Friends and Influence People, but that's Dale Carnegie.
Correct,
right?
yeah.
I actually read that as a child, and then I found, we had a house fire 5 years ago, and I lost my entire library that I've been reading since the age of 12.
Oh my gosh.
I was saving all my books for one of those library walls with the ladder. Well, I lost everything. And my dad used to make me do reports on the books, so I had binders of all the stuff I wrote for the books. Lost it all, but so now when I am out, especially garage sale shopping, I pick up books. So I picked that book up again, and I read it again just probably about a year ago. But it's a great book. So how do you spell Cialdini?
Sure, it's Cialeini.
Fantastic. Okay, well, question and answers. I'm going to ask you questions on behalf of our members. I just have a couple. I know you write speeches. So do you write them, and then you talked about working with somebody. Do you train them then afterwards?
Absolutely, because content is obviously got to be right, but if you don't work with that speaker on the coaching, all the hard work of the speech could go down the drain, and it is absolutely essential. And I mentioned this one I'm working on right now. I'm saying we've had no fewer than 4 coaching sessions for this 25-minute speech. And every time we work together, he gets better and better and better. And he's also practicing in between sessions. But you have to have both, because I got to tell you, and the reason why is very simple. The first time he delivered that speech, he was terrible. And he was terrible. He needed somebody to say, this is how you need to deliver that line. Your voice needs to go down when you're talking about something that is negative. When you ask a question, your voice needs to go up. He needed somebody observing that. Once somebody told him that, he picked it up. And every time we have gotten together, he's gotten better and better and better. And tomorrow's our last session before he delivers it. And my hopes are high that we're there tomorrow. But we met 2 days ago, he was so much better than the other time. If you don't do that, you're going to be in trouble. Again, that delivery piece will fall away. So you've got to take that time to practice, rehearse, and coach. Like I say, to me, the heavy lifting is done after that. I love that part of the job. That's the fun part of the job. So
good. And so do you also help people get hired to speak?
I typically do not do that. Not that I couldn't, but typically the person has an engagement that they are signed up for, and they are ready to start literally with a blank sheet of paper on their message. And that's where I come in. I mentioned I have a journalism background, so this whole Q&A piece and digging into their head and figuring out the best way to present what they want to present is really my forte. And then again, coaching them on the delivery. But like I said, that might be actually an interesting avenue of business to pursue. But like I say, I just love making smart people look smarter.
I love that. You make me look smart tonight.
This has been really fun.
Good. I'm glad you're having a good time. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight. And do you want to give everybody your contact information and maybe a little bit more about what's the process of working with you? What to expect?
Sure. I mentioned that typically a speaker has some idea for a speech. Perhaps they've been selected as a keynoter. Perhaps they're winning a big award and they need to give a really good acceptance speech. There's all kinds of reasons. I've done a TED Talk for a professional conference. Some conferences are going to that style. So it really doesn't matter. It's all across the board in terms of types of speeches. So typically the presenter would say, I need a speech type of thing. And we would get together, typically one-on-one, although my guy in Europe, we do everything virtually. And I've done about, I don't know, 5 or 6 speeches for him at this point. But that's all done virtually. And we get together and we do a lot of Q&A. The first step with a new client is really getting to know that client. We just do a client Q&A where I just focus on really getting to know the person. Because you really can't write a speech for somebody if you don't know about their background, how they grew up, what they love to do. You really got to get to know them as a person. Because, again, I talked about making connections. If they like golf, there might be a way to introduce, their passion about golf in a speech. But if you don't ask those questions, if you don't know them very well, you're not going to do a very good job. So step 1, really get to know that client, do a deep dive into their personality, their loves, and all about them. Then you get together and you talk about, what is this topic about? Again, that audience analysis, I can't overemphasize that, super important. But once we get into kind of the topic and the meat of the speech, we have several Q&A sessions with the speaker. And then once I feel like I've got a sense of where we need to go, and I go away and I do this Post-it note thing, right? We talked about that. I do that Post-it note thing to kind of get the connection of how we're going to get them from the beginning to the end. And then from there, I write an outline. And at that point, then I share the outline with the client. This is so important because without a roadmap, I can guarantee you're not going to be where you need to be. And that outline is so important because if you're off track, the client will say, that's not quite the right direction, or, I don't like this anecdote, I like this one better. It gives them some options and some choices. It also gives, myself the opportunity to make sure that when I write it, I only write it once. If we've got that roadmap ahead, I know the direction, I know the client is interested in that, that's where we're going, I write it to there. The writing, I hate to say, the writing then is the easy part. Some people say it's the hard part. If you know where you're going, you can get there with that roadmap. Then we do typically a couple of drafts, really, because the more solid the outline is, you're not going through a lot of drafts. Where the drafts come through, most interestingly, is on the coaching. Because once you have a speaker that sometimes they'll struggle with certain phrases, they have trouble, certain speakers have difficulty, and I'll say, that's not working for you, we need to rewrite that. So there's a lot more tweaking that happens to that speech during the coaching process. Sometimes 5 or 6 times, if you're doing 4 coaching sessions, I may be revising that, doing tweaks as we make things better 5 or 6 more times. But they're little things, but they matter because they're affecting the delivery. So that's kind of a rough idea of the process, but it's very interactive. And it's really, from the speaker standpoint, I just need to get inside their head. They don't have to write anything, which a lot of people appreciate that because they don't have time to do that. Just let me get inside your head, and that's how we'll get a great speech ready for you to deliver.
I love being able to see your passion that you have for your clients, and you really want them to succeed. And you have a glow about you when you even talk about this topic and your clients and doing it. So it's really nice to know you and get to know you and see that passion.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Like I say, people have so much to offer, and if you can just get it out of their head, they just, it's great making people, be able to share what's important to them. And again, getting them to change the minds and hearts of other people. It's very cool. So I love it, if you can't tell.
Awesome. So how do people get a hold of you when they're ready to hire you to write their speech for them?
So my company is Zumwald and Company. So there's not very many Zumwalds who write speeches. It's not like Smith or Jones, right? So my website is www.zumwaldandcompany.com, and you can reach me on my website. I'm available via phone, very accessible, and happy to talk with anybody who's serious about doing a captivating speech.
Very good. Now, do you want them to get your phone number off your website, or do you want to give that out in the video?
Oh, sure. No problem. So the best number is the office number, my wonderful landline, which I love.
Oh, no.
Oh, and let me tell you why. I know this isn't a landline thing, but when you're interviewing people, there is nothing more annoying than a cell phone issue. Especially my guy in Europe, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really anybody. You can have cell phone issues anywhere. So that's why I'm saying this now. I will have my landline as long as they let me have it, because it's reliable. When I take notes, I can type what people say. I don't want to mess with phone issue. I mean, I've got to have both of my hands typing and talking and chatting. So that's how I take notes, right as they speak. So I need my landline. But my phone number is 937-836-6802.
The last 4 numbers got lost. Sorry.
937-836-6802.
6802. Fantastic. Well, thank you again for taking this time and sharing your wisdom. We really, really appreciate it. And I know all of our members are going to be very excited about this.
Great. Lane, it was great speaking with you.
You too. And I will be getting a hold of you and we're going to go do some improv. I promise.
That's great. Count me in.
All right. I'm not letting us off the hook.
That's right. It'll make us all better.
Yes, it will. All right. Well, thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks. Same to you, Elena.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.